This material is provided by the courtesy of Kirsner Wealth Management and contains general information to help you understand basic financial strategies. Throughout this presentation, we generally discuss different financial vehicles. However, nothing we say should be constructed and recommended to buy or sell any financial vehicles. This presentation is designed to provide general information on the subjects covered. And then we have our next slot. And Kirsner Wealth Management is not affiliated with the U.S. government or any government agencies. Despite the efforts of the accurate and current information, this presentation may contain out-of-date information. And then at the end of this seminar, you'll be provided an opportunity to do a one-on-one discussion with all of the private information below. And without further ado, I will go ahead and bring Craig on.
Hey guys, happy Monday to you. I hope you all had a nice 4th of July. As you probably are aware of, the use of pesticides to keep produce alive is a growing problem, okay? That's why many people are switching to organic foods to help minimize the use of pesticides. Well, the exciting news is that a robotics company called Trick Robotics has built an AI-powered self-driving robot. And what this robot does, I'm going to show you a video of it in a second. It's really cool. What it does is it drives across strawberry fields in the evening, and it uses UVC light to kill pathogens like mildew and other, viruses without a single drop of pesticide. It literally uses UVC light to kill pathogens. And what it's done for the California is it's reduced chemical use by up to 70% across California farms. So that's a big deal because strawberries need a lot of taking care of and a lot of pesticides to keep them healthy. And it's reduced the use of it by 70%. And not only is it helpful for us not having to eat pesticides, but obviously the environment, not having to have the pesticides sprayed all over and go into the earth and the ground and the water. So it's a win-win all over. So this is an exciting technology that's already reduced the use of pesticides in California by 20%.
This is an aerial footage from Santa Maria, California, which shows what commercial-scale autonomous pest management may just look like, treating up to 60 acres of field overnight. Meet the Luna, an autonomous robot by Trick Robotics that drives through crop rows after dark, blasting UVC light to kill fungal pathogens and pests. UVC light works by damaging the DNA of pathogens like powdery mildew and botrytis, so they simply can't replicate. Right now, it's focused on strawberries, one of the most pesticide-heavy crops in California, and it's already cut chemical use by up to 70%.
Anyway, I hope that was easy for you guys to see. Hopefully you can see that. That was kind of interesting. The robot's literally by machine. This is the best part. It's not like a person's driving it. It's autonomous. It just knows to drive down the field, then it moves and goes to other areas. And so literally in the middle of the night, robots are killing pesticides with light, basically, without using any killing pathogens without any pesticides, just with light. So that's really cool. We need more of that technology going forward. Now, the reason I bring these things up is I've told you guys many times that the future is all about robots and AI-powered robots. And you guys are actually seeing now how AI and robots are really integrating into our lives. And, most of my clients are retired, so you might not integrate or use AI much. But there is one thing you probably use if you might use it, but if many people in business use it for a lot of cool reasons. But if you use Google now, I love Google search. It's one of the best searches out there. And now the first thing when you use Google is that it gives you Google AI, which is basically, it gives you a summary of everything that's important with that search. Sometimes it'll read to you what it found, and it gives you, real important facts. So that really is the next level of Google using AI, where it used to just be a search and show you a bunch of websites. Now it's summarizing all the data that it's finding into what it thinks is really the summary, the crux to answer your question, going through instead of you going through each of those tabs and trying to figure out what you're trying to learn. that Google is using AI to summarize all of those things it's finding so that it really tries to give you the answer. So you can just read the summary and pretty much get the answer, right off the bat. So that literally is AI in action, and you might be using that. Now, there's so many more tools with AI. It's fascinating, all the technology that AI is doing. Like, they're literally, if you have a repetitive task, you can have an AI robot. Basically, it's like an AI engine that will do that robotic task for you. It will literally, like, there are people with businesses where they have 15 or 20 AI employees, and that AI employee might only do one thing, right? It might be programmed to answer people's questions instead of having a person do it. People type in, I don't understand this part of the instructions, and it can literally help answer those instruction questions. So you don't need a person to do those kinds of very specific jobs. AI can learn how to do it, and then with some practice and some training, it can be trained properly how to do it, and it can work 24/7 for no money. You could have literally, there are companies with 20 or 30 or 40 AI agents that really just do one thing each. Necessarily they're very specific to a task, but that means that the owner doesn't have to do it, or the employees don't have to do it. It saves so much time. So this is just part of how AI is integrating. I'm actually going next month to Austin, Texas, to meet up with about 70 or 80 of other top financial advisors to see how they are using AI in their business, because I have 9 team members here. We just hired our 9th. And obviously I want to, keep growing, but also at the same time, if there's things that we can do to, make things more efficient for everybody, so I don't have to keep hiring more people, that's a win-win for business. And that's happening across every business. Every person's being more efficient with their time using AI. Like, for example, if I want to write an article on a topic, the first thing I do is I go to one of my AI engines and I say, and they know me, the AI engines that I pay a subscription fee knows who I am. I've programmed it to read my website and understand who my target market is, which is retired millionaires, ages 65 to 85, retired millionaires. So they know who I'm talking to, who my target market is, what's important to them. And then I say, write me an article about tax planning or about Roth conversions, why it makes sense. And so what it does is literally in seconds, it'll write me that 500 or 1,000 word article. Now, it's not going to be the best. It's going to do the best it can to try to get the information and also put it in a way that I might say it. But then I only have to take, instead of doing it for hours to get it perfect, it's already 80% of the way there. And all I have to do is read it and add my 20% of style and or stories. And all of a sudden, in 20 minutes, I've got a perfect article or chapter about Roth conversions. And I don't have to, and it took me 20 minutes instead of 2 or 3 hours of deep thought. I'm done in 20 minutes and I've got an amazing article. Now I have to fact check some of the stuff because AI does sometimes make things up or uses the wrong data or reads their data wrong. So obviously you have to be careful and do it properly. So, but the point is that takes 20 or 30 minutes instead of 2 or 3 or 4 hours. So all of these tasks that are high level tasks or low level tasks that used to take a lot of time now take a lot less time or no time, if an AI can do it. So I didn't use it necessarily when I was writing my new book, but I was using it for research. So this is our latest book. It says IRA Owners Help Defuse Your Ticking Tax Time Bomb. So I was able, and then you can see Steve and I on the cover with this big IRA tax bomb. So you're going to get one of these in the mail in about 4 weeks. A copy of this roughly in a month or 6 weeks is being printed and mailed out. So sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks, everyone will get a copy of that tax planning book. But the point is, AI is saving so much time, right? It's incredible the amount of productivity. And here's why that's important also. If you guys think back to the 90s, this is important to understand. In the 90s, you guys remember we had the tech bubble. and the stock market was going up and up and up. You guys remember that incredible bull market we had in the 90s of all the tech stocks, right? And all the computer-based stocks. And the reason the 10 years of the 90s was such a great years of the economy for most of those 10 years in the 90s was the advent and use of computers, okay? When they invented and brought out computers and really even cell phones around that time and fax machines, they brought out all this technology. But let's talk about computers. They made things very, very efficient, being able to use computers, right? Very, very efficient. And they made everybody more efficient. So back before computers, we had to type things and, it was very slow and cumbersome. And if you had to make a mistake, you guys remember you'd have to go back and white that out with your thing and then type a new letter. Very inefficient, very slow. So when they had computers in the 90s, it allowed every single American and everyone around the world to be much more efficient. So one person could do 2 or 3 people's jobs just with the advent of computers. And that's what made the 90s so great and so powerful of a bull market, because everybody in America and around the world, but we'll deal with America, was so much more efficient, getting more work done for the same amount of money that the owner had to pay their employees. They would get 2 or 3 times as much, volume of work out of them just because computers made everything more efficient, right? That's why we had the bull market in the 90s. Now with AI, it's a similar story. Now we're using these super fast computers that can think for themselves at a certain level and say, I don't need to be as the CEO or as a high level executive or even a coder. Let's say we're just trying to make a code for a software where they'd have to be pounding away and writing the code line by line by line over hours or days or weeks. Literally AI, you tell it what software you want. I want to be able to calculate this. And in minutes, it creates the entire software, okay? So we don't even need coders that would take hours or days or weeks to create the software. The software is being written well, perfectly by AI. Let's say mostly perfectly. It needs a little tweaking maybe, but whatever. It's a working software and AI is doing it. So all of these things. So now I want to create this new software to do this. I push a few buttons. AI creates that software, and all of a sudden I can start working with that software, selling that software, whatever, right? It's speeding things up and making everything much more efficient. And we don't have to have all these coders or all these people to do all the work. It's being done by the machines much faster. And as scary as that is, it's really good for business and really good for productivity. And when you have more productive society, that means, the economy is moving faster. And that's really good for the economy and the stock market in the big picture. That's what's the excitement about AI, right? Now, somebody just put a question about that these investments in AI and robots are a very large investment. Yes. So the answer is this is very expensive, right? So right now, all the big companies, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, all these big companies are pumping in tons of their profits and tons of their money into building these AI and data centers and robotic centers, all of this stuff. They're pumping in a lot of so much money that they're spending. And then they're spending amongst themselves, and they're buying more chips, and the chip makers buying more stuff. And, it's kind of like a big circle of money moving around very fast, right? If I need this from you, or you need this from me. And, the money's moving around like crazy fast, right? So the point is all of this is going to lead, it's big investments up front, but the goal for all of these companies is that it's going to lead to massive increases in productivity or massive cutting back on costs, something, or massive more sales. And it's going to, in the long run, obviously, their goal is for it to have it pay for itself by making their companies more efficient, more productive, more lean and mean, faster to market, all of these things that make a big difference in whether a business is successful or not. And so there is massive investment in making this happen. But the goal, we're seeing the benefits of it already, and it's going to just compound as not just the big companies use AI, but all the little companies. Once everybody's using AI and everyone's getting more efficient, it's really going to speed up everything and make everything better, right? So now on the other hand, because you're probably thinking about this, while it makes it more efficient and better, you might be having a thought like, well, isn't that going to hurt jobs? And the fact is it will. I mean, 100 years ago, 125 years ago, before cars and everybody was using horse and buggies, you remember whips? There were a lot of companies out there making the whips, to push the horses and whack the horses when we needed a lot of horses and buggies, right? And then Model T came around, Ford, and all of a sudden we don't need horses and buggies, and all those whip manufacturers, 99% went out of business, or maybe 100, I don't know. No, there's got to be some, but you know what I mean, right? But guess what? All those whip manufacturers, they started building something else, because now we need, for cars, we needed mechanics, we needed people to, build the cars, we needed people to make tires and gasoline stations and engineers, pump more oil, so what happens is when things change, certain industries like buggies and whip manufacturers go out of business. And then all of those people that were making whips that we don't need anymore start making cars or windshield wipers or tires, all the stuff that goes into a car manufacturing industry, right? And an industry that has cars, right? And so things will shift, obviously we'll need less people to do things like coding and less people to do things like software and, because the computers will be able to do it much more efficiently and faster, but we're going to need higher levels of people to do other things, right? So there will be disruption. The next couple of years, we're going to see some massive disruption in a lot of industries as AI and robots take over jobs, frankly, so things are going to change. It's going to be painful. I mean, change is never fun. And but these are the facts in the world that we live in, and it's changing real fast. This is just some of the things that are changing, right? I know I've told you this over the many years that we've been doing this, I think 6 years already, in different ways, but it's nice to kind of bring it up to date. But how this applies today is what's fascinating is that in Hong Kong, they're coming out with the first completely robot-run convenience store, okay? So it's going to be a 24-hour convenience store that's completely operated by a humanoid robot. This is very interesting. This humanoid robot can literally stock the shelves, they can handle checkouts, and they can use voice and visual recognition to actually interact with customers and talk to them because it's a robot, right? And kind of read your face and talk to you. And so let's look at some of the images of this robot that's going to run Hong Kong's first 24-hour open convenience store. This is fascinating. So let me share this with you. Here we go. All right. So this is a picture of the outside picture of the store. And hopefully you can see this. It's kind of a small store. It doesn't need to be very big. It's got literally one door in on the right, one door in on the left, or you can walk up to the open window and it's got stuff stocked. And there's a robot, which I'll show you a picture of the robot in a second. But that robot, which I'll show you up close, is literally the manager and the employee and everything. It's everything, right? It runs the whole store. So let me share with you a picture of the robot up front. This is amazing. Hopefully you can see this okay. So this is literally the robot in the store. And you can see it's got a cute, not cute face, but it's got an interesting face. They'll make these better looking over time, I'm sure. But it's wearing a funny Santa hat and it's got the coffee in its hand. And so it literally can pick up anything from the back. You can see it sells stuff. It can pick up stuff. It can, process your credit card, answer your questions, and interact with you, which is fascinating to me. So that is now, as somebody said, that's a big investment, right? Where you have to buy the store, you got to buy the robot, you got to make sure it works, and somebody's got to keep an eye on the robot, just remotely to make sure it's working. But the point is, imagine you've got a convenience store open 24 hours. You don't have to pay a person or technically 3 people, because even if you have one person working 8-hour shifts, you need 3 people to work 3 8-hour shifts. every day for 52 weeks. So let's say an average employee costs 60 grand, just for round numbers, at a convenience store. That's $180,000 a year, not to mention turnover and theft and bad problems. They don't show up. You maybe need 4 people just in case somebody's not there. So the point is, instead of having 4 people at $240,000 a year, you make one big investment up front in these robot run stores. And then after that, your expenses are very low, hopefully. Now, of course, this is the first one. So obviously it's going to take more time. And, it's going to get cheaper. That's the best part about this. This first one's going to cost a fortune. In a year or two, that same store is probably going to cost a third of what it costs today, because as they build more volume and more demand and more ramp ups of this, and the technology gets better and the computers get faster, all of these costs, when you bought your first smartphone, and if you buy a fancy one, it's very expensive. And then over time, that same technology gets cheaper, hopefully. I get fancy phones, but, the point is, relatively speaking anyway, you get the point, right? So right now it's very expensive. Next year it'll be here. Hopefully, as they build more and more in a couple of years, it'll be so inexpensive and so much cheaper than hiring 4 employees to manage one store. And then, of course, there's the excitement of a robot store. So a lot of people are going to go and buy stuff just to videotape themselves being waited on by a robot. So there's that excitement, that'll increase more sales, more profits to the company. So a lot of exciting things happen in the world of AI and robotics. That's just the latest. All right, let's talk about finance. 2 quick topics on the financial front. Okay. First, it is what it is. We're going to talk about America's growing debt problem. And the fact that credit card 90-day late payments are at 13.1%, which is a 15-year high. So not since the Great Recession 15 years ago or around then, credit cards that are 3 months late are 13.1%. So 1 in 8 Americans are 90 days behind on paying off their credit cards. And the fact is, America owes $1.25 trillion on their credit cards. That's how much credit card debt Americans have. And 1 out of 8 people are 90 days late, not paying at least their minimum. And that's not the only problem. Auto loan delinquency, paying your auto monthly loans, has hit its highest level on record. And lastly, student loan debt delinquency reached 10.3% after the pandemic era pause ended. So 1 out of 10 students are behind on their student loans. So credit card behind, auto loans behind, and student debt behind. So this is a problem, okay? Now, how bad of a problem it is, we're going to find out in about 10 days, because every quarter, roughly 2 weeks after the quarter ends, the 4 largest banks in America open up their books and tell us the rest of the story. They have to give us a full, deep accounting once a quarter on how America is doing. And when we're going to dive deep into the numbers, and we're going to find out if American households are keeping up with the bills or whether they're falling behind and banks expect if things will get worse or stay the same or get better. That's what they tell us. They say this is where we are financially and where Americans are, the 4 largest banks, which is the majority of loans in America, majority of debt. So they're going to give us a deep dive, and we're going to do a deep dive into this information. And it's going to let us know that either the payments are staying the same and things are okay, we have time, or the banks are expecting that things are getting worse. We're seeing that they're getting worse over the last 3 months, which means that unpaid bills are getting worse. And with the market closing the first half near record highs, but if the household economy in about 10 days, we're going to find out if they're getting worse and the late payments are getting worse and the banks think that the cracks are widening, the future growth that we're expecting is probably not going to be nearly as high. Not that we're expecting, but the future growth that everybody's expecting is probably going to be not so good if Americans' payments are late and getting worse. So we're going to keep an eye on that. We'll report back in a couple of weeks on what they say, but that will be priced into the market pretty quickly, that if Americans' consumers' debt is falling farther behind and banks expect this to get worse, that's not good for the economy. That could definitely put a big curtail on the market. If they say everything's looking good, things are fine, then the market rally could continue. We'll let you know in a couple of weeks when we're back back from Cancun. All right, last topic, the big picture cycle. Everything goes in cycles, right? And we look at the 20-year cycle. Every 20 years, historically, we have challenges. Obviously, the past doesn't predict the future, but you guys remember 2007 was a market top. 1987, a lot of market challenges, market top. 1968, so pretty much every 20 years, give or take. So we have some concerns. If 2007 was the last market top, sometime between 2027 and 2029 will be the top of that potential top, if that 20-year cycle holds. Nobody knows, but that's kind of the cycle. Roughly every 20 years, we have challenges. So we're obviously concerned about that. But then there's the 4-year election cycle, okay? So this is the last thing I'll talk about today, the 4-year election cycle. So typically in the 4-year midterm election cycle, which is this year, we don't know the market, the Wall Street doesn't know who's going to win in November, right? And the stock market doesn't like uncertainty. So what that means is that typically, historically, obviously the past doesn't predict the future, but history does rhyme. So historically, the market, usually between about July and October, November, the markets usually head down, right? So that's generally what happens in a midterm election year. Obviously, we don't know, but we are a bit more defensive in our portfolios in anticipation of that challenge. But we are a little more defensive because we anticipate the next couple of months could get pretty rocky in the market. So if that's the case, we'll be even more defensive than we are now and be ready for those changes. And then in October, November, typically there is a bottom historically, and then we'll look for a buying opportunity to get back into the market at a lower price. And Steve will keep an eye on things and decide with his research-based teams when the right time is to do that. So we're very, very happy about a lot of different things. We're doing great, growing like crazy. If there's anything you guys need, let us know, call us. We're always available. We have seminars, as you know, every couple of weeks. So if you want to bring a friend to a dinner workshop, we get a ton of referrals around here. So have a great July, have a great summer, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks after we're back from Cancun. And call me if you have any questions. Good talking to you. Hope this was useful for you. Take care. Thanks.